So without any further delay, I would love to introduce you to our very, very, very distinguished panel, starting with Rebecca Hong. Rebecca, could you give us a bit of an introduction of who you are and...
Hello, good morning. How are you? Did you have a good first night in Melbourne? I hope you did, and that you had so much fun that this morning you're still groggy. That's always a good sign. We'll wake you up. My name is Rebecca Huang. I live in San Francisco, California in the US. I'm a venture capitalist by day, but what I do on the side is teach. I teach at Stanford classes on AI and creativity, technology, innovation, and the Thunderbird School of Global Management, which is part of the Arizona State University. I also serve in the global board of GEN.
Sam?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sam Curry. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Major Transport Infrastructure Authority here in Melbourne. I'm born and bred in Melbourne. And I'm responsible for setting the IT strategy for, I suppose, Victoria's largest infrastructure investment, over $100 billion over about a decade. I'm really happy to be here this morning. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is this one on?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's on. It's on now, I think. Good morning, everybody.
Sarah.
My name is Sarah Dodds. I lead the Advanced Analytics and AI practice for GHD Digital for the Southern Hemisphere. My area of expertise, if you like, is bringing disruptive innovation to market, and how do we turn new concepts and revolutionary changes in technology into things that actually make a difference to the world. So I've co-founded startups, I've co-founded startup programs, I sit on the board of startups. AI for me is an extraordinary moment in history that we get to be a part of. And as part of that, I also sit on the ISO technical committee that's developing the standards to help us work with AI safely.
Well, it's marvelous, and I can't thank you enough for including me here, and I must say I've read the report, and it's really the best right setter I've seen, so not only read it, but I hope you'll get it out as well. And as a second aside, I'm thrilled to be with all of you, but I'm particularly thrilled that this young man is here today, because the issues that we're going to be talking about will affect all of us, but you will become a leader in, I think, one of the most extraordinary changes literally in the history of the world. So I was just thrilled to see that you were in the audience, so thank you for joining this. But for me, I'm Christopher Schroeder. I also do venture capital about 80% of my life, though mostly in emerging markets, so very global, very international, some Silicon Valley. I founded a fund called Next Billion Ventures, and the billion is not money, though that would be nice. It's actually about people, the billion people who have access to technology in places that often the West doesn't think too much about. And of course, AI, as I'll talk briefly, is in it as well. And about 20% of my time, I live in Washington, D.C., and I do a lot of work with kind of the government folks there to help them understand not only the trends economically, bottom up, that's unleashed by entrepreneurs, but things like AI. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that. And ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, welcoming our very, very distinguished panel. Excellent. So I just want to give you a quick snapshot of where I think the world is going. It's almost like crystal ball gazing, okay? And nobody knows where the world is going, but the best we can do is do a little bit of crystal ball gazing based on the trends that are currently in progress. So up until November 2022, which is like 7 or 8 months back, we were having a very peaceful coexistence. AI was going on at its own pace, and it was adding value. It's called narrow AI, but suddenly this generative AI became publicly visible, where computer systems, the simulation models using natural language processing learn on their own, and with release of ChatGPT, it just hit everybody's attention, and the possibilities are beyond our current imagination. Our view is this revolution, if not more, is as significant as the digital revolution that we had in 2010. what was the digital revolution we had? We had all these new technologies that came into existence, that started changing the business models, that started enabling innovation, that started the way we do things in a faster, easier, more cost-effective manner. And suddenly, even before we knew, our lives transformed. How do we know that? Just look at Uber, look at Netflix, look at Amazon. And what were the industries before we had all of these? These platforms became such an integral part of our life. So the last 13 years, we have been leading a very transformed life directly as a result of digital technology revolution. AI is the next phase of that exciting generative AI revolution, is that next phase of the revolution, is going to change everything that we do beyond our comprehension. That's the reason why we are excited, but also many of us are very worried too, because it is such a powerful tool, it has significant potential, but if we don't manage it the right way, there are also huge challenges for the society, the huge risks for all of us. So we'll delve into some of those topics. So let me get started on the questions. We'll keep it conversational. So I'll start with Sam. Yourself? AI takers, shapers, and makers. How do organizations figure out what approach or combination of approaches to take and why?
Thanks, Kumar. That's a great question, one that I'm being asked to consult on. Look, it's hard for I think a lot of the C-suite to understand the capability of AI at the moment. They know that they need to do something about it. In some areas, they feel responsive, depending if they're a digital-first organisation or not. So for those that are digital-first, they are looking at their strategy and how their strategy can play a significant part in cultivating, ideating, germinating ideas that can be liberated or delivered through a new paradigm. So I think that it's very important for organisations to spend a little bit of time and effort in something that they don't understand, and to have an open mind into where it might be applicable and where it might certainly not be applicable at the moment as well. Given that we're at some sort of a peak of inflated expectations, I would say, at the moment, with these large language type learning models.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that, Sam. Rebecca, I'm going to go next to you, and I'm just going to ask you an obvious question. When you have a Stanford professor on the panel, you got to ask the Stanford professor, can you tell us what is AI? What is generative AI? You gave such a wonderful explanation last night, so just give us the basics.
I'm just going to ask the audience, how many of you know the difference between generative AI, machine learning, LLM? Raise your hand if you feel confident. Okay, so I think we have a good half of the room who really understand this topic, so we're going to do this really quick. Yes. The main differentiation that's important to note is that artificial intelligence in itself is not new. We have had artificial intelligence as a field for many decades. What's new is generative AI. Which in November 2022 has become one of the fastest adopted technology products in history. And what generative AI does is that we can use these algorithms that we have generated over the years to generate content that is machine sourced. So when we talk to an application that's using generative AI, it feels like we're talking to a human because it is creating new content or new combinations or iterations, permutations of content. And we can argue all day long about whether this is real creativity or creation versus combinatorics, recombining information in new ways. But that's what we've been hearing about a lot in the recent months. To have generative AI, we have these language models, LLMs, that are allowing computers to speak or pretend to speak like humans. And every time they interact with us, these applications learn because they iterate at their algorithm to incorporate new reactions, new interactions with humans, which based on this machine learning process, they're able to better respond to us, talk to us, get to know us. And so that also feels human-like in that sense.
Yes, fantastic, Rebecca. A human-like experience of engaging with machines. That is what is happening right now. That's what we are seeing. That's what is exciting us. Now we have Christopher Strouder from Washington, D.C., and Rebecca is from Silicon Valley, and that's where most of this invention is happening, whether it's Google or Microsoft or other platforms. This is where this building, this co-creation, all this development is happening. Very good to have Rebecca's perspective. Chris, what are you seeing in Washington, D.C., again, in the Capitol, where there is, again, a lot of buzz? I was there 6 weeks back, and there's a lot of buzz about AI. So what are your views about what is happening on the political or business point of
If
view?
I may, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to frame it a little bit in kind of broader themes, because Washington is very much like everyone in the world who's trying to figure this out, but they just come at it from a different base of understanding. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But I think there are 5 quick themes I'd like to share with you, which affects how Washington views this, but absolutely is what I find as a venture capital going overall. And it's interesting because we'll probably debate a little bit about, is this as big as we think it is, or it's less. And there's this wonderful quote that was attributed to Arthur C. Clarke, the great science fiction writer, but he actually never said it. But it is that tech revolutions are most often overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run. And I think AI is this on steroids overall. And I think the first quick observation I would share with you is I went to a dinner of people you would know, Rebecca, they're early stage AI investors. And there was almost this overhang of that recent tech phenomenon like crypto and Web3, like blew up. Like it's coming back, maybe not. But there's a sort of idea that we're in a hype cycle right now. And it was such a surprising view of so many people who thought we were in a hype cycle and that it would cost a lot of money to invest in these companies and everything else, that finally I turned to them and I said, is it possible we're not hyping this enough? And my own view, quite frankly, is we're not hyping this in many ways enough. That doesn't mean any individual investment won't look too expensive, but it means that I don't think we fully appreciate what we're in right now, which is the second observation, which is I think we are to new territory with really limited analogy. All of us will try to tell you this is like the internet or like anything else, and I have to tell you I don't think it's like anything. Like it's like just something different in this world overall. Every company and every organization in society will become an AI company or society or organization, I think in some form. Sam Altman, who is the OpenAI founder, was just in Washington. He said something almost parenthetically that really hit me, because he said that this is very often with technology moves kind of exponentially and then it sort of settles down. And he says, I see no settling down in any time in the near future. This is exponential becoming exponential and may even accelerate, overall. And I think really the headline of your research in a way is that all bets are on the table now. It's just a new thing. Third, quickly, is that this is a global day one phenomenon. So I spent a lot of my time in emerging markets. And literally 1 month after GPT-3 was released a year ago, every entrepreneur that I saw from Indonesia to Cairo to Sao Paulo, these young people were using it for really funny, interesting, amazing efficiency ways and experimentations that were making their business different and also had them rethink business overall. And I think my conclusion is, and I say this in Washington overall, that I can't tell you how this is going to play out. I don't have a good investment thesis about thinking about it, but my general view is that the one certainty we have is that if any enterprise has a significant being the key word, amount of unique data sets, they are going to be sitting on something that's going to be incredibly valuable to them in the future. And by the way, that includes government as it does business and everything else. Now, even that has uncertainty. So I had a person much more sophisticated than I in Silicon Valley tell me, I think that's true, but it may not be true because the internet is so large that maybe there's just so much data out there, the idea of having a unique data set may have no meaning 3 years from now. That's what we'll have to see to it. And the last observation I'd share, and let me just tell you, neither Silicon Valley nor Washington is good about what I'm about to say. But we need to be in an era and age of humility. And this is not the key of how Washington thinks. It's not the key of how Silicon Valley thinks. But I think we have to go and weigh in all of this to first principles. Is this technology making our life better, easier, faster, more efficient, more beautiful than we thought it was before in a real way that we can understand? Are we clear about the use cases of what we want to do and its unintended consequences? And third, it really is a story about data. And that means privacy and many of the issues that you raised in your report that have unintended consequences in it. So in a way, this is as much true in Washington as it is in the Valley.
Yeah. Fantastic, Sam. That's great, and I'm delighted with your perspective there. I'll go to our very own Sarah Dodds. Sarah has been a very valuable colleague and a co-author of this report that you can download. Sarah, can you give us some highlights of the report based on our research? We've released this globally, and we have received quite a few accolades about our, very practical and very balanced view. So, Sarah, what are some of the things that the audience could get in a 2 or 3 minute summary of the report?
Thank you, Kumar. I'd like to start with a safety moment. Safety is really big for us at GHD Digital, and when we have these enormous changes to society, the best of us and the worst of human nature comes out to play in times of opportunity. The dark web is already a mature economy that's on the same scale as a medium-sized nation. You can buy fraudulently somebody's identity on the internet for less than $100. It comes with a money-back guarantee and an NPT survey. What we're going to see in terms of generative AI is the dark side of entrepreneurship, and the dark side of the web is also running like crazy with this, and they are looking at first mover market advantage. What I think is going to happen is that phishing is going to move to voice calls made by generative AI with somebody that sounds like somebody you love, telling you that they are in danger or that they are unsafe or they have been damaged, their phone has been broken, their face may be damaged so that they don't sound quite like themselves, and they need money from you right now to get themselves to a safe place. That makes me want to throw up. It is a horrible thing, but I think it's coming, and I think there are signs it's already happening. The personal safety moment, I think, for each of us is to sit down with our families, particularly older, less tech-savvy members of our families, and reflect on something that's deep in our family psyche, a ritual, a shared memory, a place, and have a validation that if that call ever comes, you really, really need to know whether it's them or not. I hope it never happens for anybody in this room, but if it does happen, you have a way of validating through something that you can't get hacked, that it is actually the person. End of safety moment.
Just 1 minute, apologies. There are a large number of people at the back. There are lots of seats here. They're all reserved for you, so come on in, whoever, and take the seats wherever you can find, because there are lots of seats that are, we don't want you to be standing, so thank you. Sarah, please continue. Sarah, please continue.
Thank you. All right, safety moment is done. To talk about the report, actually, Christopher, can I just pass you that? Look, I have my gorgeous assistant to my left. So to the report, we are facing a moment of technology convergence. I think it's been called out by Christopher, it's been called out by Kumar. It was a fascinating dinner last night full of people who saw what we're living through. Tony Seba coined the term technology convergence, which is when a group of technologies together reach a point where the world is able to profoundly change and new things become possible. That's where we're at, and our world 5 years from now is going to look very different. So the report starts with giving some definitions. The too long don't read version is it starts with what is AI, what is generative AI, and Rebecca gave a great summary of that. AI is about patterns, Gen AI is about generating IP. It's things that have never existed before. It takes us through, where are we? It takes us through some of the applications. So a horizontal toolkit. So from a horizontal view, AI is not specific to any industry. Generative AI can be applied anywhere. And it gives an example of some of the capabilities that it brings and some of the things that you can do with it. It then goes for different industries. some of the use cases that we think might happen, some of the ways we might use it, particularly in the area of sustainability, where we know our planet is in trouble and we need to do less with more. I am actually really looking forward to looking back on this in 5 years' time about where we're going to have got that right and where things are going to go in a different direction. Because when you're gazing into the future, you never get it all right. The world happens in unexpected ways. It goes through the challenges. So things like job displacement. What we've learned from past industrial revolutions is that jobs do get displaced, new jobs get created, but there is not a one-to-one correlation between the jobs that go and the jobs that come. And I think we've got some learnings from the past and some thinking about how do we embrace the possibilities while looking after those whose skills may no longer be relevant or need to move to a different place. And there's already a wonderful application of AI in actually doing job mapping and transferable skills about where could you do that retraining and what industries might people move to. It covers off privacy, fake news and misinformation, which is, again, people deliberately wanting to use this to get a point across without regard for what's necessarily right. Bias, which I regard as separate, which is the unintended bias. And you know that moment we have, for those of us with kids, when our child does something that really gets under our skin and then somebody who loves us both says, yeah, that's you. We're going to see that with generative AI. We actually are going to uncover a bunch of long-held human biases that are kind of ugly and we don't want to acknowledge, and again, to get pulled out into the light, because what we've accepted from ourselves, we won't accept from machines. So there's going to be a question of how do we evolve that to a better place, but we can't jump from what we've always done to what's actually right. And then hallucination and what happens when AI gets something wrong, and what I call the front page of the age test, which is what is the worst thing that could possibly happen and how much trouble could that end up in legally. It then goes through a number of principles around responsible AI. So things like transparency and being able to explain the decision that you've made or explain the content and where it's come from and the referenceability. Fairness and how do we actually manage bias. Really important that we protect the data and look at privacy, privacy protection around what we're doing, accountability, ethics frameworks, and some of the work in emerging standards. What's fabulous about bleeding edge tech is that standards come from known experts agreeing on what's best practice and writing it down for other people. When the tech's this new, finding those experts and agreeing on what's best practice is a little bit interesting because it has to be done by consensus. So that's another part of the thinking of the safety rails that are coming. And then it gives a great framework on how to get going. What are the things to think about if you want to embrace it? But the piece I'd really like to emphasise is it's coming. The biggest risk you've got is ignoring it and having it come up and bite you unawares.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a very good summary of the report. We still have a number of young professionals who are the future of our universe standing at the back.
Come on down.
We have reserved seats for you. So I would love you to come and take these reserved seats. Don't go out of the door. You're running off. Don't run off. Come and sit in the front, please. All right, there are three findings of the report which I want you to be aware of. We have used analysis based on information. One is the generative AI market will be $1.5 trillion in 10 years, 2033, and roughly $50 billion US right now. $1.3 trillion is roughly Australian $2 trillion globally. The potential for generative AI to drive a 5 to 6% increase per year in global GDP over the next 10 years is possible. 5 to 6% increase in global GDP. And another significant finding of our report is the potential for AI to enhance productivity of knowledge workers by 4 to 5 times is very likely through automation of routine tasks, real-time analysis, and enhanced decision-making processes and reduction of human error. On that note, I will now go back to Sam. Sam, how do big organizations place the right bets? You know, you're a CIO, you're a very big organization, you're looking at these big bets we have to place. How do you do that?
So part of the exercise that we've run of late and that I've done previously is to get the balance right, I suppose, is understanding, I suppose, the organisation's appetite for play money, or a little bit of a game of poker, if you like, in saying, you know, when I look at the organisation's financial envelope and where they want to be investing, part of that investment will be in bread and butter type initiatives, things to keep the organisation moving. And then part of that will be in more strategic pursuits, things that generally are vision-led. And then generally you might have some compliance and regulatory spend that you have to spend. And then generally there's a portion of funding left, Kumar, that you can call it play money. And if you can get the support of the board and of the executive leadership team to throw some bets on the table and try and experiment in a few different use cases that support where the business is looking to go. And, you know, the rate of success may differ in that space, but also the rate of value and return is also can be exponential if one or two of those bets comes off well. So I think you need to be prepared to speak to the C-suite and to the decision makers around taking a calculated risk or a little bit of a bet, and praying that you get one of them right that kind of lets you get away with the ones that you got wrong.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sam. All right, the next question, Rebecca, is for you. I've been to Silicon Valley 4 or 5 times after November. And before that, it was all these digital technologies that were getting all kinds of funding and whatever. And then post-November, the whole funding situation has just shifted like this, about a massive pivot. And anyone I talk to in the VC world, they're just talking about generative AI. Now, you live there. What's your perspective on what is happening in the VC world? Because innovation happens where money flows. And right now, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that an additional $40 to $50 billion is going into building this new technology called generative AI. But Rebecca, we'd love to hear from you because you're just living there.
Yes, you know, we remember that when we started this year, we're technically going into recession or massive correction in the market when it comes to technology and the VC space. So as VCs were preparing for markdowns, we're also getting ready to deploy money at discounted prices, which for some of us VCs, it could be a good opportunity to strengthen our portfolio. But that didn't quite happen the way we imagined because of artificial intelligence bringing newfound interest and curiosity by a lot of the venture capital community, but also non-traditional investors. Family offices were not into venture. Now they're looking at deploying capital into this space. And so even San Francisco, I was talking to the chief attorney of San Francisco, and he mentioned that year to date, it is estimated that $15 billion just in the San Francisco city area, this is not counting Palo Alto, have been deployed in AI. So that's all we talk about. Every company, if they're not an AI company, now they have the clothing and the appearance of being an AI company. You cannot have a pitch without answering the question of how AI is going to threaten and or help enhance your product and service. And so we do have this mixed feeling in Silicon Valley of we are very excited about the opportunities. This may be the 12, 14, 24 months where we build the next couple of $1 trillion companies. This may happen in the near future, and it could come out of San Francisco. And at the same time, because it's so overpowering as a topic that we hear over and over and over, I joke and I say I'm starting to have AI syndrome, which is artificial indifference syndrome. I just can't hear it enough. And also at the same time, I'm sick of it. And so that's the mixed feelings that we have, I think, in San Francisco right now.
You've seen a lot of different cycles of technology. How do you come out on this being hyped or overhyped or underhyped, particularly with the indifference? If you really kind of step back from the shtick of it all, where are you on that spectrum?
you're assuming I'm old enough to have seen more than one cycle, because I'm offended by this question. This is the first cycle I have seen.
No, actually, I'm not talking about macro, I'm talking about micro. So we had Web3, we had crypto. I mean, we had 5 cycles in 3 years of everyone, including family offices and money that's not very well experienced, rush into things. So how do you compare it?
Yes, we always had the danger in Silicon Valley of getting overexcited about new trends. It happened with crypto, blockchain. We got a little bit too excited too quickly. I will tell you that one piece of data to me that's anecdotal that makes this very different is that when I go to talk, I've been spending a lot of time in places like Chihuahua, Mexico, or León, Guanajuato, manufacturing centers. They're not the fastest adopters of things like NFTs, right? I go there, and the business community is ready to adopt, is looking for solutions, it's ready to deploy money. And if you go to the most traditional businesses and family offices, and they're bringing out their checkbooks, that means that the clients, the customers are already eager to buy products. That makes it not a hype, in my opinion.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Rebecca. And Christopher was referring to the time between when you were 2 and 20 right now. So Christopher, this question is for you. What are the specific industries or domains you see generative AI playing an active role in the next 5 years?
Everything.
Yeah.
I'd like to give you, it's my favorite example of one that sort of makes perfect sense in hindsight, but when you hear it, it's still extraordinary. So I was with Anil Bhusri recently, and Workday, which is extraordinary. This is interesting. A lot of people don't know who he is, and he's sort of like the best of Silicon Valley in a way because he doesn't tweet and he doesn't do stuff to spin stuff up. He just builds one great company after another. Workday is a very interesting company that's has been offering tech services in a B2B setting, anything else. Anyway, he was an early partner of OpenAI. The Workday was an early partner of OpenAI, so they could experiment with GPT-4 back last summer, right? It's that kind of a thing. So they're starting to think about like how can we be using the data we have in our own company to actually enhance performance of employees in our own company overall. So they have this review cycle where they review their employees every couple of weeks and everything else, and they actually have them written down and all. And they're starting to think to themselves, well, we have unbelievable, not only data, but unobvious data that can be very instructive into what we can do to see whether or not you're developing the way you are. So they would take data sets not only about the kind of classic performance review, but they actually keep transcripts of every Zoom conversation. So they know, am I over-talking or under-talking in a given thing or whatever it is. And then, of course, like everybody, they have data about expense reports and that kind of stuff. So am I actually spending $100 more than everybody else when I travel and all this kind of stuff? The long and the short of it was they used this data, and obviously the other data that's available in the generative AI area, to write reviews of the employee, and they started using this. And all the managers are like, this is extraordinary. One, it's pretty much everything I would have said. Two, with a whole bunch of insight I never would have had before. So I turned to him and I said, so you're telling me 3 to 5 years from now, a human being is not going to be doing anything in reviews other than talking, right? And he said, November. November. This was 3 months ago. So I just think that I just use an example that there's no company which is not of scale or of size or is building up to sales and skies that at the very least will not use this as an efficiency perspective, but at scale will be able to do things with their business that are very powerful. But that's when you trip into some of the issues that Sarah was talking about. Yeah. Because it will have ramifications. Efficiency sounds great to a venture capitalist, but it has enormous ramifications societally.
Yeah, I think on that note, I just want to give you some more facts. And the fact about 2 months back, I met up with the president of the Institute of Life Sciences. And that institute with Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, who was a part of Apple, and a number of other very well-known luminaries, about 10 of them, they wrote a letter, and a very open letter, to ban the development of AI for 6 months until we figure out what to do with it. Because in their view, it posed very serious threats to the society.
And maybe Elon wanted to, catch up a little bit to things that got ahead of him, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
Just maybe.
Absolutely. So that happened. Then when I was in Washington, D.C., about, 6 to 8 weeks back, the top CEOs, Satya Nadella and others, Sundar Pichai from Google and others, were called and said, this stuff is really dangerous. What are you going to do about it? And they said, Mr. President, we will self-regulate ourselves. So it was publicized and whatever, but this is some people see this as very dangerous stuff. And when I asked some of the CEOs and other board directors, they said, Kumar, this is like fire. With fire, you can keep yourself warm when it is cold, or the same fire can burn your house. It is, in our view, that dangerous. So I'll go back to Sam. Sam, what is your view on legislation and managing and controlling this? And then, Sarah, I'm going to come and talk to you about standards. And then we come back to the audience with your Q&As. Keep your questions ready. And the more provocative they are for the audience, the better, for the panelists, the better it is. Sam, what do you think is happening in the legislation regulation space?
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
But that's just not true. You mean in Australia?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm talking locally. I haven't seen anything in Australia of any substance, and others might be better informed. I think there will be lawsuits that will come out of it, and that will help probably tighten up the thinking around it. I think when you have a day one technology like this, you to some degree need to let it go for quite a bit of time to see how it works and where it has value and where it doesn't. Yeah. You don't want to stifle it too much. But generally, I haven't seen anything locally. I'd be keen to understand, Chris, your views from what you're seeing more globally.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. And I think that's general view as well. Chris, do you want to add anything to that as well from an emerging legislation perspective?
Do you have a view on America's side
Yeah.
as elsewhere?
So I was in a room just like this talking about artificial intelligence and what are the jobs that are going to be replaced by AI and which jobs should be replaced by AI. And there was a comment that all politicians should be replaced by artificial intelligence. And that got a standing ovation because they're not doing anything anyways. No, I think the speed at which these changes are happening, just like Chris said, in San Francisco, sometimes we plan these events. And I was mentioning yesterday on the panel that we can't even plan a month in advance because the topics become obsolete by the time we run the conference a few weeks later. And so if you think of that change to the point that if I'm not having meetings, in-person meetings with the builders, the head of AI of NVIDIA and people like that, I fall behind. I can't keep up with all of the developments. And so with that rate of change, there is no way that a congressman, woman, senator, legislator will be able to know exactly all of the dimensions of this, how this technology is evolving real time. And that means that whatever they pass as a law is going to be probably inadequate by the time it's implemented.
Just one sentence, if
Yeah,
I could.
please.
I couldn't agree with that more. I think when you think about public policy, Europe got way ahead of almost everybody else with the first draft of regulations. America's come, China has a draft. Regulations are out overall. But I think at the essence in public policy, there are two fundamental drivers. One is analogy, and the other is incentive. And from an incentive perspective, it's very clear. There's nobody raising money for the next primary by getting out ahead on AI very much. And so you have that dynamic as well as the competency one. And then on the analogy one, I mean, in many respects, the European regs were based off of GPTR. It's like we did this, and so therefore we'll make this a GPTR. I have people in Washington who say we need a nuclear test ban treaty of AI. I'm like, well, that's a hell of an analogy. But that is, in fact, the way their mindset, but it misses the very things that I think Rebecca said.
I might just
Thank you.
to close.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Sorry, I'm going to put my 2
Sarah,
cents.
and then
Thank you. That there is some movement in Australia. There is an AI ethics framework that the Australian government has put out. At the moment, it's voluntary. I reckon it's one scandal away from becoming regulatory. But for those of you who are in the space, recommend you go and have a look at it and think about how you can actually get ready for the softly phase at the moment for what's coming behind it. And there is also a responsible AI network, which is run by CSIRO's Data 61. Both of those are ways we're getting started.
Yeah, I was just going to close out by saying that what we have done, I didn't see it as a legislative framework, so perhaps I misinterpreted the question, is we've put out, based on those frameworks, a do's and do nots just to guide our teams and our staff around it. For example, I read of I won't tell you which bank in Australia, but someone uploaded their whole board paper into ChatGPT and asked for a summary of it. So you could argue that information is now in the public domain.
Yeah.
So we put out some do's and do nots, and I spoke about it at the board, into what to use it for, and possibly at the moment what to think twice about.
Yeah.
But I don't see that as a legislative framework at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll go to the audience now for your Q&A.
Kumar, just before we do that, can
yeah,
I please we were going to talk about standards.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. There are international standards on the way. Every standards organisation in the world is working to develop them. A number of them have already, I think there's 27 that have been released, and there's another 61 being worked on. They are being adopted by Standards Australia. As they come out internationally, they're flowing straight into the Australian context.
Do you think we'll have an IIEA or something of this? Do you think there actually will be like a global body that will do this?
At the moment, the bodies are trying to juggle just getting something done because they can see the speed that's needed and the work that needs to be done. So we're trying not to let the good be the enemy, the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think it will end up being mostly aligned. With some differences across bodies, but their goodwill around just getting something done, I think, is the imperative at the moment.
Yeah, I recently met with the president of International Standards Organization, again, Austin, and she's saying that they're working double time to come up with standards that will help the cause. But right now we don't have any standards, we don't have any guardrails, we don't know what it means, and that makes it very, very exciting. Now come to the panel now. Your questions, please. We have 14, 15 minutes for your questions. And Tash will take your questions. So, the gentleman here.
Thank you. Can you touch on post-AI society? What will happen to us? Like, will we know how to write? Will we know how to be creative?
I have a view on that AI is going to profoundly change our education system and what we need to learn and the skills that we need. The one statement that I am hearing over and over again is that people who do not know how to use AI will be replaced by people who do know how to use AI. Some of the things that we generate in terms of how we examine learning, how we test for skills people need to have developed to be valuable in the workforce, we need to actually change the way we're thinking about that whole space.
Yeah. Rapid fire. So next gentleman there. Yes.
Good morning. In education, especially in Australia, we ask students to write papers or thesis. Is there an alternative to education because AI can do this now? So what sort of alternative can be done?
What happens to the education industry? That's what you're asking. Rebecca.
I think we will, we've been talking about disruption in education for decades now, but this is the time. I do believe it. I believe that universities will radically change the way they teach. No longer it's going to be a matter of knowledge transfer. When my kids ask me, which shark is the fastest shark, I say, I don't know, you go figure it out. Ask the 10 different tools that you have available and you interpret that. This is a truly relativistic society now, right? There's no one truth. Everybody will have to make sense of it. So in universities, we're not going to tell you knowledge because you can find that, and knowledge is created now in a very decentralized way. What's going to happen is that we will focus on telling you how to develop skills that will better equip you to differentiate yourself from other humans. Like, I am better than this, other teacher, and also distinguish yourself from machines. So I'm going to have to compete against humans and machines. How you tell that story, how you actually explain and articulate that uniqueness is going to be really the key survival skill set. I don't think the Stanfords of the world are equipped to do that well right now, which brings the opportunity for newcomers to actually teach that better.
and also in our own terms. So how you learn is different than how I learn. So my tutor in my pocket will be different than your tutor. And I was saying this last night, in Jordan, I spent some time in the Middle East. In Jordan right now, the average school class is 75 kids with one teacher. And every teacher makes most of their living by being tutors to the kids who aren't getting the education they had before. Now, all of a sudden, anybody with a smart device and whatever comes next, how they learn will be actually a conversation on their terms and the way their brains process, as opposed to the one-stop shop that has been, remunerative education for centuries. So that, I think, could be very interesting as well.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman there.
A framing around positives, or climate change, health, social challenges. What can it do in that space?
G'day, Andrew. I wasn't expecting you to be here. A lot. I think it's a horizontal toolkit that is only limited by the creativity of the minds that put it to work. So diversity of thought in the space. My favourite thought process is, let's assume it's magic and it could solve the problem. What's the problem we'd like it to solve and what does an outcome look like? And then start experimenting.
Good, thank you.
About bias, is this global recolonization of everyone, basically? Because if you look at some of the models, it's very biased and basically looks to exclude minorities more strongly and globally. So is this global recolonization?
Yeah, good question. Bias is a very serious concern. Any one of the panel members want to take the question on bias? We did debate yesterday. Anyone wants to address?
I can reiterate the earlier thought that I think what we're seeing is a very unpleasant codification of our own behaviour. The bias is there and it exists. These models are trained on the internet, which is biased. We don't like to admit it, but I think we can pull it out into the open, measure it, take a long, hard look at it and change it for the better.
So what is happening is we are already biased. When you put it in generative AI or whatever, it accelerates and it makes it more visible. So from my perspective, bias is becoming visible, which then allows us to deal with it. All right, gentleman there.
G'day. When the hype starts to cool down in adjacent future, not the abstract future, and we start seeing the real gain in the market using Gen AI, what those real gains excite you the most?
From the VC perspective, I think the first, most exciting applications will be in health, some in education, and also in all of those traditional, conventional businesses that have a lot of potentially automated processes, manufacturing, supply chain, logistics. You have a lot of data that we have been collecting over the years. We haven't been using it correctly, and there's tremendous impact on the use of technology when done the right way to able to improve those businesses. And just to add on the topic of recolonization, because it's related to this, a lot of this adoption, especially when it comes to health, education, maybe manufacturing, will be outside of the North America, Europe markets. It will be probably Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa. And the reason is that we don't have as many regulations sometimes in having these pilots. Now, when you do more pilots, that trains the system. In this case, the more you use it, the better the tool becomes in understanding that particular set of customers. So if Latin America starts using these applications in manufacturing and health, actually maybe the opposite. The power dynamics of geopolitics may switch now for these applications to be more favorable in some ways to those first users. And so we have an opportunity. I don't know if we'll use it, we'll take advantage of it.
All right. For all those, we will have the last and final question now. But before that, the next session is also very, very interesting. It is chaired by Christina Girakitis, and it is all about AI, spirituality, and the future of innovation. Very exciting topic. So all those who are thinking about other exciting sessions, don't go, because the next session is also very, very, very exciting. Jaisal, one last final question,
Thanks.
and then we will have a photo opportunity for the panel, and then we will close. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumar. You could sell ice to the Eskimos. I've always had a professional brain crush on Neri Oxman, who coined the idea of we're in this age of entanglement, former MIT professor. I've just started to understand that she set up this new company that is focusing on the potential of AI for the natural world, the systems world, and this potential for AI to actually help Mother Earth re-energize. I'm really interested in whether anyone on the panel has insights into that, or what is the promise of AI, not for the human potential, but our Mother Earth potential.
Wow. I haven't read that, but I've read Life 3.0 by Tegmark, and I think it's a fascinating read, and it goes to some of the other questions that we've had about the future and what it might look like. So I'll take some homework to read your suggestion, and if you take mine.
Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for this very, very distinguished panel. Download the report and join us for the next panel. Thank you very much for being such a wonderful audience, and thank you, panelists, as well.